Well, I'm Rana Begum, and this is Peter Cully from Spatial Affairs, and we have been.
Artist. You're an artist.
I am the artist, and he's the architect. And well, I've been working on this project for 9 years, and I've been wanting a live-work space where I can prioritise my children and prioritise my work. And Peter has been working quite.
You hold up.
Okay.
So bear with us. We're doing this as a double selfie thing while keeping social distance. So anyway, to start with, I think it's important to say we're standing in the middle of the site. I'm just going to pan around a bit like this. And what's really extraordinary about this location is totally packed in by other buildings. And the one that we're pointing at now that might look a bit sort of ordinary is important is because it's where Rana was originally working and saw this site.
So in fact, so this was the building that I was renting for a few years, and I ran a non-profit studio space. So we had loads of other artists in there. And the rent, as it does in London, went up really high, and we couldn't afford to continue renting. And then this site had been on the market for a year, and and I met the landlord, and he was keen to sell, but he wasn't keen to sell to a property developer. And when I kind of spoke to him about what I wanted to do, he was really interested. He liked the idea of keeping the Muse is full of other artists, musicians, furniture designers, globe makers. There's lots of things happening in the Muse, and he was quite keen to kind of preserve that. So when I met Peter and we had a kind of chat about what we wanted to do and how difficult the site is. So the site is kind of L-shape, so access to the site is really, really difficult. So we had to kind of take all this stuff into consideration and come up with something that worked for me, kind of living upstairs and working downstairs as well.
Yeah, so shall I talk a bit about that? So when I joined, it was very clear what Rana needed in terms of, I call it a compound, a kind of retreat, where she could be with her family and her work and her workers and guests, and be connected to London but totally separate. So that was a sort of wonderful start. What we then sort of evolved together was the idea of, given that it's this crazy site that's completely, as we said, constrained, how can we make it, really a wonderful place to live? There's only one place in the whole site where you can have windows, and that's up here towards the cemetery side. We're just going to swap. And wow, what a wonderful place to be able to have windows. So you've got a wonderful opportunity on one side, but a sort of extraordinary compromise, if you like, on all the others. So what we said is we'll do two separate buildings, which I think was quite brave for us all to agree to, because on some level you think, well, you must fill the site entirely up with square footage. But we thought, no, let's not do that. Let's make sure we can create this gap between the two buildings. So there's one to the right here, which is the entry building, and it's completely open underneath so that Rana can use that as a sculpture court, and as you can see at the moment, for actually making artwork. And then on this side, we call it the north building. It's 2 stories high and goes to the ground. And the really key thing is we get this courtyard in between to bring light down to all those spaces. Just while we're here, probably it's good to say, is in terms of the architecture, we also, having got these 2 masses, we also wanted to come up with a way to sort of lighten the effect of the mass. And so if we try and stand forward a little bit, maybe just point to this one.
That way.
Hopefully, is it working?
Yeah.
Hopefully you can see that the wood cladding, this is all a Scottish larch. It's sort of angled in ways that give you these pleats. I always say it's like a pleat in a jacket, or in even a t-shirt, where 2 panels come together. And so what happens is the forms are all sloped. There's no verticals on the exterior except for the windows that are set in. And what we liked about that is it feels a bit like a sort of its own animal sitting in between all these sort of very strong surrounding pieces. we really like keeping the quality of the surrounding too. And part of that is a sort of memory of London. And maybe
there's the air raid
maybe
shelter.
That sounds overstated, but it's quite important. Rana, you can talk about the air raid shelter.
So the site had an air raid shelter that wasn't listed, so it was very kind of basic, and it was kind of Second World War, and half of it was kind of above ground, half of it below ground, and we were quite keen to kind of keep some kind of memory of it. And so this beautiful kind of texture. Oh, am I still connected? Yeah. And I love the kind of the different texture and material that you get. And so Peter, what I loved about working with Peter was how he was kind of really sensitive to that. We spent quite a long time, didn't we, Peter, working together and refining the idea or the design, if you like. It's been a 9-year project, and we didn't think we could actually pull it off.
Took a lot of determination to keep it going.
It did, but I was really, really fortunate to have met Peter and have a great team, the contractor, the project manager, even engineers, structure workshop, I don't know if you're there,
landscape architects,
everyone that's been on the project has been incredible, and I've just I still can't believe I'm here, basically.
So maybe we should, with that, go inside.
Yeah.
What you can see behind us now is the entrance. I'm just going to try and go back a bit further, if it holds. You have to bear with us on this Wi-Fi call. So this is the elevation. Okay, this is the elevation of that north building, and straight ahead is a double door. And this is quite an important moment, isn't it, in that, to swap over again, because it's the sort of threshold between Rana's home and her workplace. So in a minute we'll turn left so we can have a quick peek.
So we're in the lobby, and then
home,
this goes
which we'll
up
come back to. But if we were to go straight ahead, we're in Rana Studio World.
Yeah.
And you should talk about your needs.
There's about 3 spaces here in the studio, and they're kind of separated to create kind of for a different kind of part of the work. So this is, you can see that we still haven't quite unpacked yet. This is one of the studio spaces where we're going to be using it to kind of document work. And put up any new work that we do. It's really important for us to have something that we can have, a space that we can kind of stand back and see the work as well. So this is a piece of work, Jasmonite work, that we finished in the old studio, and so it's quite useful putting it up in here and seeing how it changes throughout the day with the natural light as well. You can see kind of the texture, how the light kind of picks up on the texture and the surface. And I love these 2 spaces on the ground floor. The way, so this was a bit of a surprise, I guess Peter had, was that I wasn't expecting this massive piece of glass to look so amazing and to bring in a beautiful light.
So maybe I'll just talk about how that works. So what happened when we walked through that double door, and then you saw that the site sort of opened up massively to the left. That's the L shape that Rana was talking about. So the cemetery is right over there, and that, again, that's the farthest the point that we've got any opportunity for windows. So what we did in this part of the site is create these sort of sculptural rays in the ceiling, and you'll see on the other side there's another skylight, but all of the glass is what we call structural glass. It's triple glazed, it's low iron, so it gets this very clean quality of light that Rana needs for her work. We've got a little doggy joining us. But what's really interesting is all the lights are off in this part of the site now. Because of these 2 angles, the splays as we call it in the roof light, it just bounces the light that way and back in. And I think a lot of the time you do actually use the space with the lights turned off, don't you? Even in the deeper parts.
And then, and I love being able to have kind of these massive wall spaces. That was something.
The wall spaces maybe is something important to talk about. Rana knew me from doing museum work, and one of the things I think we always find there, working with curators, is that there's always a huge need. The real estate for curators is obviously clean walls that you can work with. And as an architect, I think you're always balancing that out with, views and beyond. So in a funny way, this is perfect because we couldn't have the views beyond. So what it gives us is a monopolized wall space, and again, just with the sort of sculptural feelings above. And we did feel that the way that we folded the forms worked in the way that Rana folds.
Yeah, I think that was one of my favourite things. Oh yeah, there's
show here
a piece of...
is a good example of the folding. And we've got that next door, haven't we?
Yeah. So we'll take you to the next
Here's
space.
a fold in progress.
Oh yeah, this is one that hasn't got any paint work on it, so it's come back from the fabricator. This is our studio kitchen. Again, you can see some reflector work in there. Anyway, I like to kind of put reflectors in various places. This is the other studio space where we've got more work up. So this space is mainly used to do kind of finer detail work. And again, I love how the light plays with the work here. Clara here is working with the fishnet.
Maybe just to talk about the artificial light, which again, luckily we haven't had to really have on today. But you can just see one in the background there.
Yeah.
All the lighting is LED. It's at a colour temperature that Rana was used to working with. We spent a lot of time in your studio, didn't we?
Yeah, so Peter actually spent quite a bit of time in the studio working on the design, and I loved that aspect of it. I felt like Peter really understood how I work and how I kind of wanted so actually before we demolished and built this place, I was living here with my children, and so Peter spent quite a bit of time here seeing how I function as with the children and with my team and how we work. And that was really important. I felt that was kind of really significant. I don't know what you thought, but for me, it just put me at ease. I felt like you really knew, the kind of things I wanted, what I would look at, and how I wanted a space that would adapt to the need and the change as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think our role is observation or observer.
Yeah.
We have to do that. It's a sort of balancing act between what all of the different factors bring to a project. So partly, that's our own personalities as architects, but it's not only important, but it's also great fun to watch how different people use their spaces and find out, what their needs are. But I could see Rana, in this space, which was a bit of a sort of shanty, wasn't it? Yeah. Right here, in this space in the old building, was where the workshop was. But there was light from above.
Yeah, I mean, I did have to kind of constantly say, don't think, remember that when I get old, I want to be able to carry on working, Peter. I want to be able to carry on making my work. So that was really something I had to keep
and also it was very cold and raining inside, wasn't it? And
God,
so that's also something that you've got to have comfort.
We had the brief was really simple. I said that I didn't want a water feature inside. I wanted it to be warm enough so that I could wear one layer of clothes, so it was really simple. So anyway, let's show you the basement, the workshop.
Yeah, I'm going to keep going.
Also the office. This is the office. Chantel's in here. Hendrix too. Hey Hendrix. Hello baby.
So, let's explain a bit. Here's interesting. We hoiked the floor to ceiling up on this side, which I think our structure engineers... Well, they found that interesting challenge maybe, but it's split. So the ceiling height on this side is lower than that side, and it was just so we could get this sort of slither, quite a generous slither of light for the office. So this is where Rana spends a lot of the time sort of planning work, isn't it? And the administrative side. So it has to be quite calm and a bit away from these sort of making spaces. You've got to be able to observe it, but also have separation. And the other thing we wanted to do here was give Rana her own access to that courtyard that we talked about in the beginning, which we are meeting with the landscape contractor this afternoon to start planting. But on this part of the site, we felt it was okay to have a higher floor to ceiling. There we lowered it, so the space you'll get to see above this in a minute could be taller, because that's a gallery space.
The other thing was that we had the cemetery wall, so we wanted to get as much light in and maybe even a bit of a view of the cemetery. And so you're able to, by lifting up the ceiling, we're able to get a slither of that.
A slither, yeah.
Yeah.
And you see that cemetery wall in the distance.
And I love how, in the morning you get the light kind of coming through and going across the wall, which is really beautiful.
So we're going to have a look down in the real workshop part of the site, and we're going to go slowly because in case our Wi-Fi jumps across.
So at the same time,
might do it from here, right? Yeah, we're back.
At the same time as unpacking and building storage, we're also
Here we go.
we're kind of continuing to make and produce work as well. So some of those machines that you see in the background are machines that used to actually be here on this site. So this site originally, which was kind of packed with machines, you could barely move around, and so we've managed to kind of hold on to a few of the...
Yeah, that was... Oh, hang on. Oh, yeah, it was kind of poetic that they came back home. Right, we can go back up. It might blank out again for a second. Right, so that's the tour of the studio complete. And now we're going to go back to the lobby. And if I flip it again, so there, just so you get your bearings, that's where we started. That's the courtyard between the two pieces. And now we're going to turn right.
Yeah, so this is where I wanted separation at the same time, but also this flexibility where the children can actually come down and, know that I'm here. And they can be upstairs.
So this is where... just give us a second. We're on a new network, a Wi-Fi network. So this... Oh, we've got a wonderful... wonderful performance happening. What I was trying to say was this is the sort of quite extraordinary moment when you go up above the cemetery wall and the site starts to sort of reveal itself. And, it's a wonderful thing to work with, because really we just had to show it. We just had to show the cemetery to best effect. And so we're going to stand at the top of the stair. This is where that split level occurs that we mentioned downstairs. So you have the living room space, which I'm just going to pan across. And you might wonder why there's skylights as well as windows. Well, one thing we wanted to do, make sure the light was very, very clean. And the interesting thing about light coming from trees, it's sort of obvious, but it's green. And if we hadn't had the skylights, the space would have had a greeny feel to it. And so this is the space that's taller that I mentioned, that Rana uses as a workspace and a gallery. And I quite like this because although we're in the domestic, the sort of private part of the home, it's like a bit of the studio has conceptually leapt up. So we have, in a way, we blur the boundaries, but not in sort of too obvious ways, I think. And it was important for you to keep a sort of separation, wasn't it?
It was. And also, I desperately wanted something that kind of allowed me to kind of work and not have to keep moving things around. So these are some of the drawings and watercolours that I've been working on with my team. And it was really important to have a space that I can kind of say it was my own without being interrupted and having to move everything each time. And I love having this view of the cemetery and having this connection with nature. I love seeing how the light changes throughout the day. So we just earlier we had kind of sunlight kind of filtering through. Yeah.
Yeah, and I want to say here what's quite important probably is that when you're given such a sort of strong element, the forest or the however you want to describe it, in a building, and you don't have necessarily a feature on the other side, you've got to make sure that the architecture steps up to do something. So it's a bit like those homes that have a view of a beach. You've got to be very careful that towards the back of the home, it doesn't just sort of fall apart or fall away. And so we made this quite dramatic space, which has got absolutely north-facing skylight. So that brings a very sort of clean quality of light into the space. And they're quite sculptural too. You'll see this one just curves off as it gets to the bottom. And there's lighting that's embedded quite discreetly in amongst all of the ceilings too. And then the other thing we always try and do is sort of generate axes and something on the end of the axes. And so sometimes it can be a window. In this case, maybe it's the skylight and the sculptural stair. And on this end, it's more artwork.
Yeah.
So there always has to be sort of something in the distance. And what's so wonderful, I think, working on a project with Rana is, well, there's many things, but one of them is that you have this extraordinary potential for art to be part of the experience. I think that's always great for architects who work with museums or art clients, that there's so much more to it than the architecture and the person's sort of, own world. There's a third element. And in some ways, I think this is a museum home, wouldn't you say? Because it's not obviously,
for me, it was really important. It was really important to have something where I can not only be able to put up my own work, but also other artists. So I have a very small collection of artworks, young artists that I've been collecting over the years. Actually, this is an artist, Nathaniel Racco, and this is one of my really, really early works when I was at Chelsea. And it's just having kind of works that kind of bring things together and kind of, it's not about just having them on the wall and that is it. It's about being able to live with it, being able to kind of connect with it. That was really important. These are some of the watercolours that I've been working on since the lockdown, and I've really, really enjoyed. They kind of tell a story about the whole situation that I've, really struggled with, like everyone else. And I wanted to kind of find a calm moment in the day or while I'm homeschooling to be able to manage everything. And these watercolours are, I haven't been able to kind of let go of these yet. So they've been up on the wall for a while now.
And I would say I personally love the sort of looseness of this, that it's, it feels informal, I suppose, when, I think you can see that on this wall too. It feels to me that this is a gallery, but it's also a studio. It's also, a place for the kids. So for me, that's a great sign. It says, I love spaces that are flexible, that don't require all the walls to move and the ceiling to have to change. I think you strive for flexibility in spaces because of how they're formed. Yeah. Of course, doors are great, but I think this is really working in that way, isn't it?
Well, I think it's great that we haven't quite finished the building yet. I love the fact that I can live here and still see how it can grow and how things can, so we've pulled out certain things because we wanted a bit more time to kind of think. We want to think about the material and also how it will over time might change as well.
Yeah, and I really believe in actually time with architecture, although we might also, can't we just hurry up and get it finished? And essentially all of this was designed, but I think it's the final touches that do make a lot of difference.
And it's great we haven't fallen out yet.
At all, ever.
Yet.
But that we're not going to.
No, we're not going to. Well, you can't leave.
All right, so let's swap it around again. Sorry, we keep changing our viewer. Did I do that? Oh, here we go. So now we're going. This is another thing I really like to do, is to get circuits in a space.
Yeah. So this is a space where we actually pulled out of the contract, because kitchen is a space where I spend a lot of time with my children. They love cooking, and we realised actually this is something that's quite special, and we'd like to be able to kind of get this right. So by living here, it's been how many months now? I think 5 months now. It's given us kind of a bit more time to really think about the design, think about the materials that we want to use as well. And this is my incredibly beautiful view of Avenue Park Cemetery, where I actually take time-lapse videos of the light changing throughout the day.
I'm going to put my hand over, try and get rid of some of the reflection. But yeah, another thing that is always wonderful, I think, to work with is nature. And I think increasingly in our lives, you know, this is something that's been showing up for a long time, I think, and it's probably become even more exacerbated in the current condition, is that, you know, we need nature to help us, and we need to treat nature better, because look what it does, you know, look how it helps us out. And we just have had wonder, haven't we? Every time we sort of punctured through a wall, or where a window became available, you know, we just found all these extraordinary moments, because the building that was here before was below the wall. You couldn't see above it. And it's quite nice how the trees and the vegetation make spaces. So you can see here, the trees sort of happen to open out in a wonderful coincidence, just where we wanted them to around the living spaces. And just so you can understand, when the kitchen is formed, the counter will slide down on that slope, and actually the counter will touch the ground here, and then the ramp goes down alongside the counter. So if you can imagine that, it will be, you know, you can walk up the counter basically, but it just flows. And I think that's something, again, that if the spaces feel like they flow, then you can reinterpret them. There's something quite interesting about that. If the kitchen sort of slides into the living room, and the living room has artwork and the kitchen has artwork, although there is definition between them, you're able to sort of keep slurring the boundary, I would say.
Yeah,
Does
I mean,
that
I love the idea that there is not that much of a separation. I mean, we've separated the bedrooms, but I love this space being open, the fact that I can see the children when I'm working, I can hear them. That was really important for me, to feel kind of that I'm still kind of connected to them. This is a piece of work that I've been kind of playing with at home, and really kind of enjoyed seeing the reflection of the cemetery on it as well.
So there's a lot more of the house to see. We're going to have a couple of peeks into other areas, but we're not going to get onto everything. Just quickly before we leave this area, this is quite key, because this gives you an idea of how the two buildings sort of jump across the courtyard. So up there, behind that blue stair, is the guest accommodation. So that's 2-bedroom, has its own, you know, it's a full flat, and it has its own roof terrace. We can't go up there today because of it will break, the coverage will break. But this we're looking at here is Rana's, the sort of more private parts of the house, which are connected across that bridge. And I quite liked how in the end the bridge forms a kind of doorway between the living spaces and the and the private spaces.
This is an artist that I'm just going to jump in there. This is an artist that I used to assist for about 5 years, and I absolutely love her work. Her name's Tess Duray. She's a painter, and she's been kind of my mentor and my kind of, you know, go-to person when I get stuck.
And I've met Tess. She's really great. Yeah. So here is the bridge. Oh, and we found another performer, which is good. So if we just do a 360 here, Rana, this is a really key point in the house, because it's like a sort of X-ray through the longest part of the site. And I always like to try and sort of maximise that. Where is it that you could really get the long diagonal or the long lateral view? And that light in the distance actually will be a clear view to one of the showers, which you can have a curtain if you want to, but also you can have a shower beyond that frosted glass. It will be clear and be in the fullest length of the house. But we created this bridge experience exactly so the slightly smaller people in the
This is Jabril.
family, in the community, could experience the garden and the building. So where we had that sort of, we have to do a little focus. So
do you
where
remember
we had
this?
those incredible views onto the cemetery, here it's much more about a closer view onto the building. Rhonda, you talk about the art. And do you want to talk about the AD?
So this is...
Yes. I'm sorry, I interrupted when you...
That's okay.
Sorry.
These are some of the works that I've been collecting over the years. Some are kind of artists that I've studied with, and some are artists that I've kind of discovered either on Instagram or, through teaching. So this is kind of Dominic Desperado. This is Testure again. And this is, I've just forgotten the name. Michael Adgerman, Gideon Rubin, Charles Amby, Noel Foster, and there's Hitoko, my friend, Flor Nove, and there's Mary Harrell there as well. I love having other artists work in the house and being able to kind of see, not just my own work. I don't actually like to have that much of my own work in the house, and this is another artist that...
So, what we have on this side is almost like cellular, isn't it? It's quite sort of monastery-like. We just have 3 bedrooms, 2 smaller bedrooms, a family bathroom, and a master suite at the end that wraps around and it hovers above the mews and gets light from there. But we'll just give you a couple of snippets. Here's Jabril's bedroom. So they have really these extraordinary views, if we can, will it work going in, of the trees. It's really quite mind-blowing. Just there's a pathway that goes through the trees, and so all of a sudden you do see people out there, people riding their bikes and people walking, and it's quite surreal actually, isn't it? And I love that. It doesn't seem quite... Okay, let's see if we can... I did go to... Just a sneak preview of the Rana Begum bathroom.
This is the bathroom that's not quite finished yet.
There you go. Might have to just stand here.
The bathroom is not quite finished yet, but we hope to finish it soon.
And that will be a completely clear view again of the forest, and it will have a blind that you can drop down, when you're in the bath, and then raise it when you feel private enough, and you'll just be sort of bathing in the trees. So that's not far. You'll have to come back to see that, won't they all?
Yeah.
So now we're going to have a quick last thing. We're going to try and go up the stairs, just to have a peep, because there's a whole terrace world above this. Yeah. One of the other key things was to bring in as much garden space and landscape as possible. And so the stair isn't quite finished, but you can see it's a kind of sculptural piece also to balance out that wonderful view. And as you go around the corner, it narrows. Partly to create... Oh, do you want to have a look through this little window? Oh, yeah. Partly to create... This is how we like to sort of get the views on, back, the sort of X-ray effect. But the stair narrows partly to create this sort of intimate feel of going up into an attic, but also partly to give Rana enough space for a mini gym. I'm just going to cut out in somewhere right here. I tested it. But this is the roof terrace. There's 3 roof terraces. If you pan a bit to the left before it goes. And the idea very much here was, we've seen the graves lower down. There we go, I got you back. But the idea is to get your view up into the sky and into the trees. And it's difficult to show you now, but it's a very sort of, it's a tiered experience of different layers. And they're going to be quite wonderful, I think, aren't they? Yeah. Those. And they're planted each in a different sort of, in terms of cultural vegetation in a different way. The first terrace that we just peeked at will have all Middle Eastern plants that represents Rana's background. Then one of the gardens is vegetation. Yeah. There's one of them is vegetation, kitchen garden, and one's a dryer garden. Oh, we're going to stand over here, I think, and take some questions, aren't we?
Okay.
And how do you tell us? we just read on here the questions?
Is there questions?
So we have a questionnaire that's been sent through,
Oh, okay.
Oh, great.
and then we'll do some on live as well.
Okay.
Right.
Sanya Khan, tell us about some of the works you're currently doing. Okay. The works we're working on at the moment, we're working on Art Basel and a solo show that's coming up with Kate McGarry and some public art as well. So there's kind of various things happening at the moment in the studio. It's yeah, and I like working on different projects. I feel like they kind of feed into each other, which is really important. Yeah, and what's the next one? How have you spent your time during COVID lockdown? Both Rana and Peter. Do you want to go first, Peter?
Okay.
What have you been doing?
Well, I've been very lucky. I've been in nature. I talked about nature earlier on, but I've observed this until now, right? Really until last night. I've been outside of London, and it's been quite amazing for watching this sort of spring unfold. I've never done that with so much scrutiny.
But
It sort
you've
of
actually taken
coincided.
a pause, which you don't normally. You are a workaholic.
Right. Well, I like them.
I know I might be slightly hypocritical here. I'm workaholic too.
Yeah, we work. Well, we work, both Rana and I just moved back so you can see both of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. Both Rana and I find work a kind of way forward spiritually, don't we?
Yeah, I
Whenever
mean, for
we've
the first
had-
3 weeks, I couldn't work. I couldn't think creatively at all. I had a complete block. I wanted to not talk to anyone. I was doing, I think, what everyone else was doing, was going through all different types of emotions. But what was nice to see was that you also took that pause, because
Yeah, this was a
Yeah.
pause time for
Yeah.
people that could. I mean, a really odd time, but I definitely have, scrutinized the pace that nature works, and I'll have to. You know what, I'm going to turn it. a bit.
okay, so
And I think that's very useful in other aspects of your life, seeing how nature can be slow and it can be dramatic in its quietness. I think that was quite
yeah.
something important to learn.
Yeah. A question from Benita Shah. Does London City inspire design?
Yes. How could it
Definitely,
not?
yeah, definitely yes for me. London has always been an inspiration for me. I love walking around. I love seeing how things kind of clash and change, and it's constantly changing. But what's been interesting is that recently I've been interested in nature, and maybe it's because of, living in it now. I feel like, what you've designed for me and the kids is that we are living in a tree house and you can't get away from it. And I love that. I love that we kind of are embedded in this kind of, amazing
world.
Yeah.
I think often you can be affected in ways that it's difficult to pinpoint. I never really sort of look at buildings and say, oh, well, I need to try and make my building look like that one. But I think as long as you allow it to, it sort of all goes in. And I think these buildings, the two buildings here, are different. They're not obviously of London, but the way it sort of is edited, if we went onto the roof, you get this incredible London skyline. And in a funny way, people have said before that I have a sort of cinematic effect in the work. And I think if you work that way, what happens is you can reveal a city. So at the moment you're getting to see how we can reveal this forest, but on other parts of the site, you're re-delivered into London. And I love how this building sits next to the brick buildings in the Mews. It's not a brick building, but actually the colour of the wood is tonally very similar to the Mews. And it looks at the scale of the Mews. So it's quite subtle, I think, how it does go in and how you regurgitate it. You don't have to be literal, but you have to be open to the place you're in. And London is so mad in terms of the moments that it built so much. So we're in very much a Victorian bit here. But London has had these incredible bursts of building, and so it's a very, very, very layered city. It's got so many quirks. It's not a sort of rational experience, is it? And I like that, but I think you then have to sort of counter that with rational and with calm and with retreat. So sometimes you work with the city and sometimes you sort of, balance it.
You have to kind of create these moments, and I think this is what this building does, is really has given me kind of a retreat from the city, but at the same time it doesn't completely remove me from the city either.
Great.
Next question is from Shakshi Malik. Have you done any digital exhibitions? Well, I have. Just recently, I've done a project with Parasol Unit. So if you go to their Instagram account, there's a link and you'll see that I've done a animation, which I'm really, really excited about showing and seeing where that goes. I guess, different situation, different kind of circumstances kind of push your work, and you've got to kind of go with it and see where it will take you. So I'm excited to kind of get feedback and see how people respond to it. This is a great question, Peter.
Go, tell me it.
So be careful how you answer this question. This is a question from Daniel. Is it difficult to design a home for an artist?
Great question. Actually, I think it's really wonderful to work with artists, and this isn't just a home, it's even better because it's a home and a workplace. But I have to say, working with artists, I've found it a very direct conversation, because I think artists also know kind of their territory and are quite respectful of other people's creative territories. And so I found this was actually, in a funny way, straightforward, because we knew where we sort of clicked in and out of our roles, and we also understood where it was very important to be sort of collaborative. And so, but as I said earlier, the opportunities that come with working with an artist, which includes the art, includes a way of thinking, it includes a sort of, I think, a single-mindedness. Yeah. Artists have a single-mindedness that I like, because it's like, great, we're doing this, but if other stuff comes in that's not relevant, it can't stay. So there's an uncompromising quality.
I'd like to make a comment on this, because I think for me, I really enjoy collaborating. I really enjoy working with, people, and that was something that I think we kind of connected on. I really loved working with Peter, and I think I turned to you actually quite a lot. I just kind of talked to you quite a lot about my own work. And I think this is something that it's great when you are working with someone, that it's not a connection that ends, it's a connection that you build on. And Peter and I hope that, our friendship, I feel like I've gained a best friend.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it's exactly that. It's about being able to evolve, and it's a richness, I would say.
There you go.
We've got one more,
last question, Jess. Biggest learnings during the period?
Biggest learnings, Rana? Do I start?
Yeah, go on.
I think it is patience.
Yeah.
I mean, which is a big thing to learn in one's career, and of course for Rana in her home. And building projects are always, I have to say, they've always got nightmare times in them and nightmare elements. And you can feel like, this is awful, and next week you don't even remember what that issue was. And I think that does teach you something about hanging in there, and also letting go a bit.
Well, you haven't had to just be an architect, you've also had to be a therapist as well, quite a lot of the time.
But that's often what architects do.
I've really, really struggled, and I think you're right, patience and kind of learning to kind of stay calm in really tough, difficult situation. I mean, So anyway,
I think we're being told, are we, to wrap it up?
We're at the end now. So thank you so much, everyone. Thank you for your time, and thank you for kind of joining us on the tour.
It's great to see so many people. I think that there were probably a lot of other questions, and I think there's probably a process, isn't there? If people have got questions, they can direct them to us somehow through Architectural Digest. Yeah, I'm at Spatial Affairs. I'm at Peter __ Cully. Rana.
You are Rana Begum Studio.
at Rana Begum Studios. So
Thank you.
try us. Maybe we'll see you here
Yeah. Bye.
one time. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.